Okay, hello, good morning everyone. I'm again your teacher for today, Teacher Shelly, for our Wednesday lesson of our Maritime English. For for today, it's going to be the part 2 of our SMCP lesson, no? From last Monday's introduction with regards to our 57th week, day 2 of our Maritime English lesson. Okay. Now, for the part 2, okay, this is all about the emergency and standard organization phrases. So, from our SMCP. And to continue with the Maritime English lesson, okay, we have our lesson agenda, which is the distress signal, the urgency signals, okay, the safety signals, the standard organizational phrases, and then we have the corrections and the repetitions. And of course, for the last part is the question and answer. Okay, to continue with our distress signal topic for today, alright, okay, so in a while, let's continue with the signals distress. So, what is a distress call? So, here, this is used, a distress call is used when a vessel or a person is in grave or in an imminent danger. Like for example, vessel sinking. Okay? Now, here in this situation, it requires an immediate assistance. That is why you will have or you will do a distress call. Okay? And a distress call is the highest priority message used in maritime communication. Okay? The highest priority. And it is only used in a life-threatening emergencies. Okay? Because vessel sinking, fire on board, a man overboard, and if there's a collision and explosion, of course, there is life-threatening scenario. That is why you will do a distress call. Alright? Do not forget that. Even if the vessel or the person itself is in a life-threatening emergencies, you will do a distress call. Okay? So, okay. That is a distress call. So, whenever there is a in danger, okay, situation, especially if life is involved or the vessel itself, and you think it's too dangerous, you do a distress call or you make a distress call. So, one is mayday. What is mayday? That is the international distress signal. So, whenever you hear, okay, whenever you heard something about mayday, if you are on board, meaning they are calling for emergency help. That is an international distress signal, which is derived from the French word mayday. Okay? Meaning, help me. Okay? So, mayday, okay, meaning help me. So, normally or basically, it is spoken 3 times. Like, mayday, mayday, mayday. That's how you are going to call for a distress signal. Okay? It is always spoken clearly and it is always spoken calmly. The mayday word. It should be spoken 3 times and it is derived from the French word aider, meaning help me. Okay, we have here calling mayday. How are we going to do that? Okay, first, as I said, you spoke it 3 times. Okay, you do that 3 times in a clear and in a loud voice. Next, you identify yourself. It's either you have to identify your name or the call sign of the ship. 3 times also. Repeat the name of the vessel or the call sign of the ship, okay, 3 times. Okay, and then you spoke it 3 times. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Identify. This is, like for example, this is MV Grand Diamond, and then you mention the call sign of the ship. Okay, and don't forget to mention your position, your location, the exact location of the ship. It's either it's the latitude, the longitude, or the exact location. And mention, like I am in a emergency situation. Like you mentioned, if the vessel is sinking, if you encounter a fire on board, if there's a man overboard, you mention that. Okay, the type of distress. Or you mentioned if there's a collision involved, okay, the sinking of the vessel, the fire, you mentioned that. And then you require an immediate assistance. You inform right away that you need an immediate assistance. And you mentioned also how many number of crew on board. Okay? And then don't forget to mention the word over. It means please reply. Okay? That is how you are going to make a distress call. Okay. It says here that recording position and details. Yes, you must give the exact position clearly and in a calm manner. Yeah, I mentioned the latitude and the longitude. Okay, the bearing and distance from known landmark. For example, if you are near an island or a lighthouse or whatsoever position or known landmark, you mentioned that. Okay, and then this one, the GPS coordinates. Now, for example, how are you going to record your position? You mentioned how many degree you are from north, from east, from south, or from west. Okay? You speak the numbers clearly. Okay? Using what we have learned last Monday, the SMCP pronunciation. The Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, if you have that in your exact position, you mention that one by one. Like for example, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, 1200 or 14 degree, northeast, northwest, south, like that. Okay? Do not forget that. So you have to record your position and everything in detail. Okay? So, whenever you call for a distress signal, you do not forget to mention your exact location. Okay. And then next is, you have to mention, I said, that the nature of distress. Okay? You have to state that clearly. Okay? What is your intention? Why you are asking for a mayday? Okay, you mentioned that we are sinking. It's either you are sinking. You mentioned if you encountered a fire in the engine room. You mentioned if there's a man overboard. Okay, and then you mentioned either there's a collision with unknown object. That's how you are going to call for a mayday. Mention what is exactly happening, why you are calling for a mayday or a distress call. It should be short, all right? It should be direct and it should be precise. Okay? So, that is how you are going to mention the nature of distress. Mention everything. Position, right? Your reason for calling a distress, what is happening, okay? So, that's why you are calling for a mayday or a distress signal because you need assistance. Okay? You need an immediate assistance. You specify what help you need. Either it is immediate rescue. Okay? Mention that. Whether it is a medical assistance. Okay? Do not forget to mention that. Meaning there is a life-threatening involved because you're asking for a medical assistance. And then, the evacuation. You need an evacuation, an emergency evacuation. And mention also that you need a firefighting support assistance. Okay? You mention that you require immediate rescue, you require a medical assistance, you require an evacuation, or a firefighting support. So, do not forget to mention that in order for the rescuers to know what is going on, why you are calling for a distress signal. Now, common mistakes, okay? Why you are not rescued right away. One is using a mayday for minor problems. Do not do that. Mayday is only used for a life-threatening cases or if the vessel needs an emergency rescue. Okay? That is the common mistake. Using mayday for minor problems. Do not use mayday. You forget to mention the position, your exact location. Alright? You are speaking too fast for the rescuers not to understand you properly or clearly. That's a common mistakes. Next is, as mentioned, giving incomplete details. You forgot to mention the position. You forgot to mention the exact purpose of your distress signal. Okay? And then also, common mistake is you panic over the radio. So, if that's the case, the other party cannot understand you well. Okay? So, using mayday for minor problems, forgetting your position, you're speaking too fast, you're giving an incomplete details, you panic over the radio are the common mistakes during or in using mayday signal. So, urgent signals. Okay. In Panpan, another distress signal is the top priority is the mayday. Another is the Panpan. It also indicates an urgent situation if you are calling for a Panpan. But the difference is that Panpan is not a life-threatening call or a distress call. Okay? And still, it's spoken 3 times. Alright? So now, you know the difference between a mayday and a Panpan. Okay? Again, for the mayday distress signal, it involves life-threatening or an urgent vessel emergency situation. In Panpan, although it's still an urgent call, but there's no life-threatening involved. Although it's still an emergency call, but it's not life-threatening. That is the most important differentiation between the mayday and the Panpan. Okay, when to use a Panpan? As I said, the situation is still serious, but not immediate danger is involved. Like for example, there's an engine failure, but the vessel is not sinking. So you just call for a Panpan. Okay? Now, another. We will use Panpan for medical problems also. But the patient is in a stable condition. Alright? Another. You lost the steering control. Okay? You call for a Panpan. Another. Disabled vessel. Okay? So, you call for a Panpan. Again, you need a vessel emergency situation help, but the vessel is not sinking. You need a medical assistance, but the patient is stable. Alright? Now, how are we going to make a Panpan call? Still, you have to speak 3 times. A Panpan, Panpan, Panpan. In a clear and loud voice. Also, you mention your name. Okay, the name of the vessel. or you mentioned your call sign. Okay? Like the Alpha Bravo Charlie 1200 northeast 14 degree, like so on and so forth. All right? And then you still have to repeat it 3 times. And then that's the start. You report your location. Okay? You mentioned the how many degree you are to that area, to that landmark, and then you mentioned the nature of distress. If you're encountering a medical assistance, you need a vessel support. All right, you mentioned that, and you state clearly what you need, what kind of assistance. Okay, and mention how many crew on board, and then you describe what is happening on board or to the vessel itself. And then when you say over, it means please reply. So, calling for a pan-pan distress signal is like the same with mayday. Okay? Now, what are the components of an urgency message? Okay, let's summarize that. You have to mention again who is calling for a mayday or a pan-pan distress signal. As I said, you mention the name of the vessel. Okay? Your name of the vessel or the call sign of the ship. And then, mention where is your location. If there's a landmark, mention that so that for the rescuer, it's easier for them to locate your exact position. And do not forget what happened or what is happening. Okay? And then also mention what you need. Okay? So, here is the best comparison between a distress signal and the urgency signal. When you say distress, it belongs to mayday, right? When you say urgency, it belongs to pan-pan. Okay? The difference of the two, as I mentioned earlier, there is a grave danger for mayday. Okay? Although for pan-pan, it is still serious, but it's not life-threatening. Okay? For mayday, you need an immediate rescue. Okay? But for pan-pan, you need assistance. Okay? You require assistance. So that is the best description for mayday and pan-pan. Alright. In a real world examples, we have engine failure, but the vessel is stable. So, you need pan-pan. Okay? From the word stable. Although there is failure, but it's stable. So you only need an urgent assistance. Okay. Another. There's a crew injury, but conscious, meaning stable condition. Although you need an urgent medical assistance because of the injury of the crew, but he is stable. He is conscious. So there's no need to call for a distress signal. Only pan-pan, urgent medical assistance. And you are just drifting. Alright? You are just drifting. So, those are the real world examples of pan-pan. So, we also have frequent errors in calling a pan-pan. Okay? You use mayday instead of pan-pan only. So those are frequent errors. Still, you're not giving the correct position. You're giving long explanations and there's an emotional communication. So, that could lead to miscommunication if you were not able to address properly what signal you sent. Even if it's only a pan-pan, you call for a mayday signal. You're not giving the proper position. You give a long explanations for the pan-pan call. So with regards to the safety signals, all right, another security. Okay, security. So this is the third signal. Security is pronounced as se-cu-ri-te. Again, this is spoken 3 times. Alright? Now, security is used for safety information. This is a warning of a navigational hazards. Again, this is the third signal that crew uses on board. Security. This is spoken 3 times. This is used for safety information. And this is used for navigational hazards. Okay? Security. So, again, how are we going to use security for safety message? You still have to mention that 3 times. Security, 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 meaning you are calling for a navigational hazards. Alright. You will mention all stations, all stations, all stations. This is intended for everyone. This is used when the hazard, okay, the navigational hazard may affect multiple vessels, not just one. For example, in the area, you are more than 3 vessels or 5 vessels. And if you think that there's a navigational hazard, okay, you call for security. And mention all stations 3 times. Because your intention why you called for a security message, because of your intention for everyone that is affected with the navigational hazard. Alright? Do not forget also to mention the area and the location. Okay? You clearly state where the hazard is located. Okay? Maybe it is in a geographic area. You mentioned that part, no? Or in a coordinates, or in a fairway, or in a traffic lane, or in whenever you're approaching the port. All right? For as long as if you think that there's a navigational hazard for the vessels, for all the vessels that is near each other, call for a security. And then, don't forget to mention the nature of hazard. Like, if there's a shallow water, okay? If there's a floating object that could lead to navigational hazards, you call for a security. And whenever you encountered a zero visibility in that area, so you call for a security. And like for example, if there's a heavy traffic in the area, in the traffic lane. Also, if there is a storm in that specific area and there's a strong current in that area, for as long as it affects navigation, you call for a security. Okay. Now, the comparison between all stations and the targeted area is that in all stations, it is in a general broadcast. Okay? In targeted area, that's only the specific targeted area broadcast. Okay. For all stations, all vessel monitoring the channel, you're addressing to them. But for the targeted area, vessels near a specific location only. And then, you use here for wide area situations. But for the targeted, it's only limited or it's only in a defined area. Alright. So in all stations, you use security. Okay, and navigational warnings. But for the targeted area, okay, you only reduce here the unnecessary radio traffic. So, all stations and targeted area are two different scenarios. Okay? Basically, all stations for general broadcast. For targeted area, that specific targeted area you are mentioning. Now, for the safety announcements, okay, weather warnings is important. That's why you have to mention that also. Weather warnings. If there's a floating debris, you call for a security. When you see wrecks, okay, of a ship, call for a security because it might be hazardous through your navigation. And there's a storm alerts, if there's a storm coming, and then there's an ice warning. So all of this, okay, are the safety announcements that you have to call for a security. Alright? Those are the situations. Okay. So, in position reporting, you have to always include exact coordinates. Okay? The bearing from your landmark. How far you are from the port or from the distance. In order for the rescuers to know your exact position. Okay? Exact coordinates. And then, specific position and your landmarks. Okay? So, yes. How do you read? Okay. Now here, when reading, you have to use check signal. Okay? You have to check the signal for a clear in checking a signal, it should be clear, no? You have to ensure that the other station can hear you well. Okay? And the best thing to do is to wait for a response before you continue addressing your distress signal in order to prevent miscommunication before you transmit the important messages. Okay? So that is how you are going to address your distress signal. You check first your signal if it is clear, if it is okay, and then you wait for the response before you continue your report or your intention. Why you call for a mayday, why you call for a pan-pan, why you call for a security. Okay. In the signal strength ratings, you can see for number 1, it's unreadable. Okay? You can also see poor signal. Another, you can also see a fair signal and a good signal, and the best is the excellent signal. Okay? So, use only numbers. Like for 1, it's unreadable, 2 for poor, 3 for fair, 4 for good, 5 for excellent. Alright. Now, how you are going to rate that? Like for example, I read you 4, meaning your signal is good, but it's not perfect. Alright? So that's how you are going to respond to the caller. I read you 4, meaning you are rating your signal to a good strength rate. But it's still not perfect. It should always be 5 in order to have or in order to avoid miscommunication. Okay? So that is how you are going to rate the strength of your signal. Okay? So in standby phrases, okay, when you happen to see standing by phrases, it indicates that you are waiting for a response or instructions. Okay? That is why standing by phrases is also important. You have to mention that standby phrases on channel 16 in order for the other party that you are waiting for a response or instructions. Or you will mention standing by for instructions. Do not continue talking while in a standing by time. Okay? You listen carefully. Alright? Because in standing by position, you are here waiting for a response or instructions. Do not continue talking. You listen at that very moment. Okay? Now, if you were advised to change the frequency, alright? If you were advised to change frequency, you wait for the acknowledgement before switching channels. Okay? In order to help maintain the organized radio traffic. Alright? So, the purpose of this advice change of frequency